Hello, welcome to Creating Portland. I'm your host, Pearson Kunz, and on this podcast, I'll be interviewing progressive creators who are using their art to shape the culture of our city and beyond. I hope you enjoy this episode of Creating Portland. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Creating Portland, the podcast where we interview progressive artists and talk to them about how they are shaping the culture of Portland and beyond through their art. We are here today with the incredible Dawn Jones Redstone. First of all, what a celebrity name, but let's get into it. Dawn is an award-winning filmmaker from Portland since 1996, and she's been making all kinds of really cool art, putting people of color at the front, putting queer stories at the front, and I'm so excited to talk to her about all of that. So welcome, Dawn.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's good to be in your company today and to finally get this up and running.
Yes, we had some technical difficulties on the way, but we are here and it is going to sound gorgeous for the listeners. So the question I ask all of my guests is pretty vague, but you can take it as vague or specific as you would like. And the question is, how are you creating Portland?
Yeah.
Through your work, through yourself, just how are you creating our city?
Yeah, I think my answer is through both of those things. So one, as a filmmaker, I am contributing to the art community in terms of the films I make and what people are watching and talking about, hopefully, and just like accessing and adding all of that to our our local collection and community together. And then myself, like as someone who is entrenched with other artists, I get to collaborate and choose who I hire, choose who I work with. Help other people, reach out to other people for help. It's, all of those things are ways that I am helping to create Portland. And I mean, and some of it's very intentional in the sense that I'm aware that there's a community here that doesn't always embrace or I'm aware that there's a community here that doesn't embrace the BIPOC community in particular. We're talking about media makers as much as it should. And so one of the things that I try to do in my work is to change that by supporting and connecting with other BIPOC and LGBTQ artists here in town.
Oh, love that. Well, let's get into your work then. Can you tell us a little bit more about the films you've made? And just maybe we'll start sort of just talking about the artsy side of it, and then we'll get into that hiring and collaborative, because I think that's such an awesome element of your work too. But like, what stories are you telling through your films, and how do you pick them?
So I've been making things for a long time, but it wasn't until 2015 that I decided to kind of go big. And I partnered with a former coworker and friend of mine, Dr. Roberta Hunt, to make a short film called Sista and the Brotherhood. And what was different about this project is that we wanted to try to raise some money and write a grant and like really draw people in to get support for it. And that was the first time that I'd done something of that scale, where it was, it wasn't just like get some friends together for a weekend, but no, let's like up our game and, spend more time on the script and really build like a team of folks to have something with, a little bit nicer production values. And we did that with this story that was inspired by my friend's thesis called My Walk Has Never Been Average, about the experience of Black tradeswomen. And then also partly in reference to my own experience as an apprentice carpenter. And, this script just became a film after about 6 months of work. And then it was on the film festival circuit and we started winning awards and everything just took off from there. It was the first time that I'd made something where I felt like I was really connecting with an audience in a new way. And that feeling of, having something go from being a vision in your head to being up on a big screen across the country, around the world, like that is such a powerful feeling. And it just makes you want to do more. It just makes you want to like figure out like, how can I get there again? How can I create something that really has an impact on how people think and feel about a subject or an idea?
And what is that? This is something that I've sort of started experiencing recently too with my films is this audience reaction, which is so fascinating. And I think a lot of the average viewer doesn't see the whole picture of how everyone's reacting to the piece. But what does that look like for you? How are people reacting to you, and what are sort of the responses people are giving you to your work?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I will. Okay, I want to put a caveat on that in the sense that,
Okay.
well, I don't think that it can be exclusively about the audience. I think you have to pay attention to, are you being true to yourself and are you expressing yourself, and that piece is ultra important. Because sometimes the audience doesn't respond in the way that you want them to, and that's okay too. It's just like figuring out your audiences and finding those people. But for me, I mean, that film in particular, that first short, Sister in the Brotherhood, was very personal to me because I had co-written it with my friend Pearson Johnson, but I had written in people that were characters that were based on people that I knew. And
Wow.
so several of the things that happened in the film happened to me. And then it was, we tied it into my friend's thesis and some of these bigger themes about like resistance and microaggressions, et cetera. But that feeling of like going on the road, like being in New York City and having a special screening with a group of tradeswomen. We screened at a festival, but then we also had a small screening with the plumbers union. A bunch of women came and have people in the room, crying or saying, I've had all of those things happen to me. I've never seen our story told. Thank you. Like that's so powerful. Like that's the thing that you live for. But it's knowing that the film is still going now. We're about to have a formal release through Collective Eye. It's the first time they've had a narrative short film, and we're going to be putting that out in the world in this different way. We've been kind of self-distributing through our website, but we just connected with Collective Eye, and they were like, yeah, we want to make this available to universities around the country and be on catalogs. And it's just a different way to tell this unique story, because it's something that, there's the politics of what it means to have equity within the construction industry, but it's also a message that resonates right now in particular. We're seeing stories about. Yeah.
I was just going to ask, how does it feel different now with this current thrust of the Black Lives Matter movement? Is this film, as the kids say, hitting different, like with these audiences now?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. Like one of our, we won Best Short at Workers Unite Film Festival in 2016 in New York, and they just reached out to us and asked to screen it again, and we made it available for free for 12 hours only, because normally we sell it. And there was a huge, like I had 123 people or something share it from my Facebook page. Like people were interested in watching it and seeing it. But, there's also this part of me that, I don't know, it's a little annoying when people are so late to the game, just because we've been talking about this stuff for a long time, and there's people that are just now like latching onto it, and I'm glad. I don't want to take away from that. Like I'm glad that hearts and minds are opening in this way, but I guess there's this part of me that's just like, yeah, we've been,
This
still a
has
problem.
existed. Yeah, that is sort of an interesting phenomenon of the moment. And then, so that is like a politically charged movie. And then you're wearing your t-shirt right now for We Have Our Ways. We Have Our Ways, which is actually where I found out about you, was at the Portland Film Festival, and it screened there. And so tell us about We Have Our Ways, which is maybe even more sort of tense in the political climate.
Yes. So this one, so I continued my partnership with my friend Pearson Johnson, and she wrote this piece, and I directed it, and we got a grant from the Regional Arts and Culture Council, and it's a story that takes place in a near dystopic future, and it's about these women of color who are trying to access an underground abortion clinic, and one of them in particular who is kind of having a reckoning, because her day job is basically rejecting people's health insurance claims, and it begins to wear on her in this world, and now her cousin needs help accessing this clinic, and she just begins to find her own ways of seeking resistance, and possibly because she's just hitting rock bottom with it. Like things keep getting worse and worse for her, and so the film culminates around this moment where she realizes that she has to do something bigger.
Whoa. Whoa. And that feels especially relevant now too, even. And I know there's like protest elements and resistance elements to that film.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think what I loved about the story was that what it's ultimately about is like figuring out what is the power that you have in your own life and how can you use that for good. You know, for her, she gets to make these decisions on a daily basis about whether or not someone can have access to healthcare. And she starts finding little things that she can do to help people. But then in this broader story, she's also just kind of like ready to sign up for the resistance by the end of the film.
Yeah, which is how a lot of us are feeling right now in this moment. Like, sign me up, let's go. Awesome. And then most recently, we won awards together actually for the Oregon Independent Film Festival, but I'm sure it's done very well at other film festivals as well. But your film Magnificent, tell me about that.
Yes. So Magnificent was a bit of a turn for me in the sense that I wanted to try telling a different kind of story, also a personal story similar to Sister and the Brotherhood, but it's a queer story too. It's about two women who go on a first date in the gorge, and there's a misunderstanding that then leads to some tension, and one of them gets lost, and I don't want to ruin the story, but it's kind of about this experience of like one, you know, you're trying to connect with someone and the ways that we like judge each other and keep ourselves apart. And this woman has a reckoning in that she just realizes that, you know, maybe she should be viewing things differently. And at the same time that she's like wandering lost in the forest, and a series of things happen to her that lead her to that. And then it has this surprise Pacific Northwest ending that I don't mind saying here, that they stumble upon the salmon run and see this, like, what I consider to be this like miracle of nature, where you see, you know, the salmon swimming upstream to spawn and die. And it's this, you know, it's a simple metaphor for life, but something that if you see it in nature can be, you know, a transformative moment, as it was for me anyway, the first time I saw that.
Wow. Yeah, way cool. Loved that one. Okay, yes. So you're telling these super compelling stories, these beautiful art pieces. And if you've seen any of Dawn's films, you know how gorgeous they look too. And then tell us more about this intentional hiring and collaboration and inclusion of BIPOC artists, because I think there's this fervor of this moment right now to hire more BIPOC people, which, like you're saying, is annoying that it's only happening now when you've been doing it for years, including all of these awesome collaborators that we already have here. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, well, so part of it is that I worked at a nonprofit for 9 years that was focused on helping to prepare women for careers in construction. So I was the trainer, and I was surrounded by women all the time, and in terms of who I was teaching and my coworkers, and you know, all of us trying to like break into this male-dominated career.
So okay, so tell us more about your sort of intentional hiring and collaboration of BIPOC artists and people of different backgrounds and identities on your projects, and then maybe how does that like influence the actual project itself, is what I always find interesting.
That's a good question. Well, so I have a background in helping women get into the male-dominated career of construction. It's what I taught a pre-apprenticeship class for a number of years as a former carpenter, and I guess when I started to make films, I brought that knowledge with me about like when I think about you know, hiring someone on a crew, that represents a job for someone. It represents a way to earn a living and get by, support family. And when you look at who typically makes up crews in the film industry, similar to construction, it's mostly white men. And so I feel a sense of responsibility to try to provide opportunities for people like me. And I mean, there's that piece that's like, let's spread, you know, if I have some grant money, hey, who am I going to spread that around to? But also it's way more fun for me. Like, I love that experience of being on a set with people that look like me. Like that's a really good feeling. And I think it's also particularly important when we talk about media making that we see broader representation both in front of and behind the camera, because people say that like cinema is a representation of our hopes and dreams as a society, and if that's really what it means, and I do agree that that's what it means, then we want to make sure that we see all kinds of media makers, that something that represents who we actually are as a people. What is the percentage of the population that we should be seeing both in front of and behind the camera? I think with like Netflix and some of these newer initiatives, you are starting to see better representation in front of the camera, but when you look at what's happening behind it, it's the numbers are so terrible. I just read this morning about an article that New York Times did about the Criterion Channel, and they were talking about how there's only 2% Latina directors or Latinx directors, so both male and female, within the Criterion collection. Yeah. Wow. And I mean, there's all these people that are kind of like gatekeepers, and I mean, I think it's just implicit bias. I don't think they set out to keep people out, but I think maybe they watched a film and they didn't connect to it, so they just assumed that that's not art or that's not worthy. And I'm just interested in, one, people making spaces like that for myself and my art, but then also I have some power and I can choose, who I can reach out to and help lift up and bring with me also.
Wow. Oh, inspiring words. Yes, thank you for putting that out there. I think that transitions really nicely into the next sort of big question of the podcast, which is, how would you describe the Portland art scene or the Portland film scene in general? What are the things that you're liking about it? And then what are the things that we need to improve on or work on as a community?
Yeah, let's see. Well, I mean, one of the biggest ways that I connect to the filmmaking community is through some of the organizations in town, whether that's Northwest Film Center, OMPA, Cooch Collective, Women in Film, Film Fatales, Open Signal. Those, I have some connection to almost all of those, and it's a way to find events and potential crew members and learn about other people's projects and support those. So, I mean, that's one of the things that I think works well, is that we have these organizations that are helping to bring people together, and they're centered around very specific communities in some cases. And that's been really, really valuable to me, because they also, they have grants or they have other ways of like supporting our work besides just connecting us. And I think one of the things that is not working well is that in order to earn a living as a media maker, the most lucrative work is on the commercial side. That's where you can do something and actually be able to pay the bills in a way that, the indie films that I do, I get grants and I raise money, but we're always short of money. And it's not the same thing as being on a commercial project where, companies are investing, large amounts of dollars to get the look that they want. And when you look at that industry, when you look at the commercial side of things, whether that's literally like a Nike commercial or, a TV show that's coming to town to shoot here, and you look at who's on set, it's not, the representation is not good. It's not enough. And so one of the things that I'm doing is actually through OMPA, Oregon Media Producers Association. I just joined the diversity committee, and like kind of at the start of COVID, several of us did. And it's the diversity committee right now is mostly made up of BIPOC LGBTQ media makers. And we are trying to figure out ways to address this. And so one of the things that I was interested in working on was the Oregon Film Incentive Program, and like figuring out ways to build inclusion into that. I mean, luckily, Tim Williams, who heads that, he's on that himself already, and we're just kind of trying to find ways to help him do his thing. But there's also there's people working on diversity in hiring. There's people working on some kind of certification program that would help companies figure out how to improve their numbers. So I mean, I think those are probably the two biggest things of like what's working and what isn't, are two things that come to mind.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you bring up how tied it is to the money side. Like the money is the biggest problem, and then there's this diversity problem as well, and they're so intricately connected, right? Like these incentives don't require any level of diversity on the set or behind the scenes to get those incentives to film here. So I love that you're connecting those two in the policies it sounds like you're making, which is super cool.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, Oregon Film Office will make that policy, hopefully, but it's just also a really hard time to, tinker with a program like that, where just there's a lot of people are looking for ways to save money right now, and the Oregon Film Office has been in danger. So it's a tough time, but to me, that's like a really easy way to have a larger impact. If somebody's coming into town with, spending 500,000, $1 million, whatever it is, like I want to see that diversity on set. I want to see that money being spread throughout our community. So yeah, that's something that I don't know what kind of success we'll have, but it's certainly been really cool to just like be with, my fellow filmmakers and DPs and producers, just like trying to, see what we can do to shake things up.
Yes, love that. Oh, and so then that sort of brings us into our last segment, which is like, what does the future of the Portland art scene look like for you? What are you seeing? Where do we need to head? And then also, like, how are we getting there?
Yeah, it's funny because I think through this group, being on the diversity committee with OMPA, I feel like we're bonding and banding together in new ways, and I really like that feeling because I think there's things that we can do when we work together, and right now it feels really important to try to attack some of these industry specific problems because there's momentum, and there are people that are like starting to reflect. And that article I mentioned about Criterion Collection, like the guy that runs it was just talking about we need to do better, and these are the things we're going to do, and yeah, set an example, make that change, and let's have other people get on board with that. So I want to see ultimately more filmmakers that look like me. I want to see more Black filmmakers. I want to see more trans filmmakers. I want to see just a much broader spectrum of voices, telling these stories. And we know that. Whoops. Okay, we know that. Sorry, I'll give you a clean place to cut.
Perfect.
Well, we know that when we look at the national numbers, people of color in particular, like we're going to be the majority by, I don't know if it's that number seems to change, but it's not too long now. And, that means a drastic change is needed within the filmmaking industry in order to keep up with that and have like a true reflection of who we are. So there's that. Personally, I'm trying to make a feature film, and I've been working on that.
Tell us about that.
I'm shooting a proof of concept. It got, actually, I think when we were scheduling this, it was supposed to be last weekend, but it got pushed back because of COVID stuff. So now we're shooting it September 5th, but I don't know how much of the story I want to say, but it's kind of a return to the sister and the brotherhood genre, in the sense that it's like this mix of bits of realism, but there's also some magical realism in it too. And I'm hoping to start raising money for it in January of next year, and I have to raise a lot of money. So that's the part that's the most daunting about making a feature film, because you want to do things where you feel like you're raising your production levels, you're getting better, everyone's getting better at what they do, and the ultimate look of and feel of the film is going to reflect that. But it takes a lot of money to do that, so it's going to be intense, and I'm getting ready for it. And the good news is that what makes it easy to at least have the energy to try to raise the money is just that I'm really excited to be at this point in my career, and I know that I have people that will support me in doing this. So it's a huge endeavor that I'm ready for now. Yeah.
Wow, exciting stuff. Well, Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Dawn. It's been an absolute pleasure. So much exciting and inspirational insight for me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I want to hear what you're up to, but 'cause
Yeah, well, we'll chat. We'll chat off the pod about what's
Okay.
happening. And where can people find you online, Dawn?
Yes, you can visit my website at dawnjonesredstone.com. Dawn Jones Redstone on Instagram. Dynamo is my nickname, like
Love it.
Dynamo, on Twitter. Yeah, the folks can follow me, and definitely looking for investors and supporters.
Yes.
And I'm always up to talk with other folks that are coming up and wanting to figure out their path too.
Oh, well, thank you. That sounds fantastic. Well, make sure you are following Dawn on all that social media, on those websites. And you can also follow us at Creating PDX on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Creating Portland. We'll see y'all next time. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Creating Portland with me, Pearson Kunz. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. And check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Creating PDX, or on our website, creatingpdx.com. This podcast was brought to you by Wolf and Thunder Productions and Golden Pride Productions. See you next time. Bye!